Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Our webinar this evening is The Power of Partnership, Challenges and Opportunities for Environmental Justice. My name is Peg Schaefer, and I'm the Director of Communications at Midwest Environmental Advocates. MEA is a nonprofit law center that combines the power of law with the resolve of communities facing environmental injustice to secure and protect the rights of all people to healthy water, land, and air. We put our legal expertise in the service of communities and grassroots groups to enhance their power to defend their communities and to protect the people and the places they love. The unprecedented environmental rollbacks we've seen at the federal level over the last several months threaten the health, safety, and future of the communities MEA serves, particularly low-income communities and communities of color that have long borne the brunt of environmental harm. In times like this, it's more important than ever that we stand together. And as environmental protections are weakened across the country, MEA's mission to defend the rights of all people to live in a clean and healthy environment grows more critical by the day. Despite these challenges, there is hope, and it lies in collaboration. At MEA, we believe that lasting change comes through partnership. When we join our legal expertise with the knowledge and passion of local communities, we are more effective at protecting our air and water and the health of Wisconsin communities. This evening, we are joined by 4 community leaders who are working on the front lines of the environmental justice movement. Cristina Carvajal is the founder and executive director of Wisconsin Eco-Latinos, an organization that empowers the Latino community to get involved in environmental conservation, take action on climate change, and participate in the transition to a clean economy. Shaquita McElroy is the executive director of Coalition on Lead Emergency, COLE, and she's the mother of a lead-poisoned child. COLE's mission is to prevent and respond to childhood lead poisoning in Milwaukee, and its advocacy is guided by parents whose children have been harmed by lead exposure. Brittany Keys is Clean Air Coordinator at Healthy Climate Wisconsin, a group of health professionals committed to communicating that the global climate crisis is a public health emergency and advocating for equitable solutions to decrease the impact of climate change on human health. Paul Demain serves on the board of directors for Superior Bioconservancy and Native American Educational Technologies, with cultural programming on Madeline Island and educational outreach support for clean water and treaty resources. It is an honor to be with all of you this evening. Thank you all for being here. I would also like to welcome my colleagues, MEA Executive Director Tony Wilkin-Gibbart and MEA Staff Attorney Rob Lee. Tony is going to get us started with an introduction to the concept of environmental justice and give us a brief overview of some of the environmental justice programs and policies that have been targeted by the Trump administration. From there, we'll transition to a series of more informal conversations with our guests about opportunities to continue to move this important work forward. Tony, I'm going to turn it over to you as I bring up the first slide.
Thanks so much, Peg. And as you said, I want to just take a moment to talk about the concept of environmental justice and what that phrase means. Over the last several months, the rhetoric out of the Trump administration about these kinds of issues has become so politically charged that words seemingly have lost their meaning. So it's, I think, helpful just to take a step back and get grounded in the reality of what it is that we're talking about. Environmental justice is really about trying to make good on the promise of equality, on that promise that is core to our values as a country and that is core to our concept of what justice is itself. It's the idea, as you see on the screen there, that all people, regardless of race, income, or zip code, deserve access to a healthy environment, to meaningful influence over the decisions of government when it comes to environmental policy, and that all of us deserve access to safe, healthy, and affordable energy, transportation, and housing. Its opposite, environmental injustice, has often been borne by communities that have a relative lack of political power or have been subject to racial discrimination, redlining, or economic disinvestment. Environmental injustice has been an undeniable pattern that has played out for generations in our state and in our country, as we've seen polluting facilities such as landfills, highways, incinerators, power plants, you name it, being disproportionately cited in those communities. And I think it's fair to say that most of us probably know this reality already. We either know it consciously or we know it intuitively. So just think for an instance, um, how many examples can you recall of a power plant or an industrial facility or a highway being sited in or adjacent to an affluent community with high property values and lots of political power over that community's objections? Probably can't think of very many examples of that scenario. Now think of examples of those same environmental burdens being cited in the middle of neighborhoods of low income folks or in the middle of brown and black communities. That's probably a lot easier for us to picture. Calling attention to these disparities that are part of the fabric of our state and our country is not an exercise in social science or an academic issue. These patterns have real consequences in the blood, in the lungs, and in the bodies of our fellow Wisconsinites, especially young people. So, for instance, Indigenous kids in Wisconsin, I think we have a slide on this. Indigenous kids in Wisconsin are twice as likely as white kids to be lead poisoned. The rate of asthma related hospitalizations for Black Wisconsinites is 6 times that of white Wisconsinites. And Hispanic Wisconsinites are exposed to industrial air pollution at a rate of 50% more than the average, statewide average. These are just a few of the stark disparities that define environmental injustice in our state, and they have been produced by business as usual decision making. There's, an off-cited saying, it comes in a couple of different variations and lots of different attributions, but the gist of it is if you don't understand history, you are doomed to repeat it. And in many ways, what we're talking about today, environmental justice, is as simple as that saying that we all know. Consciously attending to equity and fairness in environmental decision making is as simple as saying, let's learn from the mistakes of the past and let's not repeat the harm that they have caused. It's about saying, let's not allow the imbalances in social, political, and economic power that are part of our society continue to cause the harm that they have in the past. Let's interrupt and stop the idea that pollution or the loss of natural areas or increased environmental risks are tolerable as long as they're situated somewhere else or some other community's problem. That divisive idea is a predominant, though often unspoken, logic of environmental decision making, or at least it has been for decades. It's an idea that's divisive. It's not only unfair and unjust, it's also usually wrong. And we'll talk about this with our panelists in a little bit. We'll talk about, for example, the fact that fossil fuel infrastructure being cited without due consideration for the local harms and the local impacts that it causes to environmental justice communities leads to and enables climate impacts that will affect us all on a global scale. So, returning to this idea, if we don't learn from the patterns of history, we'll repeat them. That brings us to the Trump administration and what it's been up to over the last several months. The current administration is in many ways attempting to make us repeat the mistakes of the past. The Trump administration is eliminating environmental justice programs and policies and even basic databases and public information and health information that's been generated at the federal level. These moves, this campaign, at best, is a demonstration of a callous indifference to the history of environmental inequality in our country and the harm that it has caused. but it's really more than that. It is, in many ways, an attempt to roll back the clock. These cuts to environmental justice policies and programs, when they're combined with permit fast tracking, pulling back on environmental enforcement, writing new pollution exemptions into agency policies, all of this in practice revives the default logic of the past, revives the logic that environmental harm is of little concern if it's directed at folks who are not wealthy and not politically connected enough or powerful enough to avoid those impacts. And this kind of attitude, these kinds of policies make us more divided and they make us weaker. So on the first day of the Trump administration, President Trump rescinded a swath of environmental justice policies and programs, many which have been long-standing for several administrations. Since then, the Trump administration has continued this attack on environmental justice policies and programs by slashing staff, freezing billions of dollars of climate and environmental justice grants. These, these grants, these programs would have combated pollution and enhanced climate resilience for all of us, and especially for the most vulnerable communities. So you can see on your screen there, in just a short amount of time, the level of destruction that has taken place. And without a doubt, that number of cuts, that level and magnitude of slash and burn policies is dizzying, and it will be consequential. There's no sugarcoating that. However, what we're here to talk about tonight and what we want to focus on is that these attacks on environmental justice do not have to push us backwards. While denial may be the official policy of the presidential administration, we don't have to live in denial. We don't have to ignore the past or reality, and we can continue to resist these attempts to divide us. We can collectively live more deeply into a common understanding that none of us is better off when the most vulnerable of us are worse off. And so the stories and the leaders from around the state that we get to talk to tonight will share powerful examples of that spirit. They exemplify the power of partnerships, and they exemplify the tremendous potential that exists when we build relationships to defend the rights that we all have to a healthy environment. And so I'm excited to get that started and just to have conversation with the leaders from around the state who have joined us. So the first example of the power of partnerships that we'll talk about relates to work that Midwest Environmental Advocates has been doing in the Beloit area. We've been working with community groups in Beloit to oppose the construction and the operation of additional gas-fired generating units at the Riverside Energy Center in Rock County. We currently represent Healthy Climate Wisconsin, Wisconsin Eco Latinos, Good Trouble Beloit, and the League of Women Voters, Beloit chapter. We've worked with those groups to scrutinize the environmental review that the Public Service Commission engaged with respect to this project. And now we're focused on helping those groups weigh in with the state DNR's air permitting process for the proposal to construct these new gas-fired generating units. The air permitting process is a special focus because these groups, through local citizen monitoring efforts, have conducted research that shows that Beloit may have some of the worst air quality in our region. So as I said, I'm really happy to be joined by Brittany Keys of Healthy Climate Wisconsin and Christina Cavajal of Wisconsin Eco Latinos. And I want to ask both of you to just tell us a little bit more about the State Line Clean Air Coalition and the groups of individuals and communities that have come together in the Beloit area to form that coalition. Who wants to get us started?
I'd be happy to, and thank you, Tony. So the State Line Clean Air Coalition is a coalition of about 6 organizations, as well as numerous concerns individuals that came together after we had completed community science work, and it was IQ Air, an independent study was done. And as Tony mentioned, found Beloit that when compared to other similar sized city, had the most polluted regional air, was the most polluted regional city in the US, so of a smaller city. And so these groups, we've been together for a year and have been working to meet with different elected officials at every level, from the local to state to federal, and engaging with our regulators. So regulators who have allowed us to get to this spot already, and have been telling us that we don't have a problem, even though we're generating mounting evidence that shows that we do. And so from the DNR and the Public Service Commission. And so I'm very grateful for our partners, and I'll turn it over to Christina.
Well, thank you so much for inviting us. My name is Cristina Carvajal, and I'm the director of Wisconsin Eco Latinos. Our organization engages Latino community and other people of color on environmental conservation and climate change action. One of our main goals is to bring awareness of the impact of environmental hazards in our communities. And as Brittany said, we found, how air pollution is impacting the communities in Beloit. And we're happy to join the State Line Cleaner Coalition and support the mission. We are focused on engaging people, the communities in Beloit, to educate them on the hazards, the impact of pollution on their health. We have partnered with other organizations in the community and done engage in talks and workshops to talk to people about it. I think telling people, teaching them about the issue is very important. One, because we need to advocate, we need to raise awareness and advocate for the situation. And also, they need to find ways to protect their health from these hazards. And we're about to install 3 purple air monitors, to continue the engagement of the community, to continue gathering data. And as Brittany said, we have, engaged legislators and the PSC on the issue.
Thanks, Christina. Brittany and Christina, most of the folks who are joining us are probably from Wisconsin, know a little bit about Beloit, maybe you've been there, but could you just tell us more about the Beloit community? Is air quality an environmental justice issue in Beloit? If so, why? Yeah, just tell us a little bit more about your community and why this issue is important to the community.
Yeah, I'm happy to start with that one. So I also have the honor of serving as the Environmental and Climate Justice Chair with the Wisconsin NAACP, and in conjunction with the Clean Air Coordinator work, I want to say air quality is an environmental justice issue across the state of Wisconsin. So every county home to a branch of the Wisconsin NAACP branch had failing air quality last year. So absolutely, Beloit is historically industrial community. What makes us so our community strong and awesome is we are a more diverse community. Over 20% of our population is Hispanic, Latinx, and 13% African American. And so, and then we also have a lower income population or higher poverty rate relative to the state average. So we have seen as of late the consolidation of Alliance Energy production to be in Rock County, and then as of late, after we received that designation as most polluted regional city, then they put in their application to expand their methane gas production.
Yes, and I wanted to add, yeah, as you mentioned before, Tony, Latinos are more likely, likely to live and be exposed to bad air quality. And air pollution, it affects respiratory, it brings respiratory diseases, asthma, and cardiovascular diseases and other, alignments. And then this perpetuates, the cycle of, of the burden, on the community. And, it's definitely, Beloit area, it's a strong case for environmental justice. And it's been documented. The environmental, the EPA EJ screen tool showed, how, the index, how the Beloit community was being impacted, as well as the CGEST tool also showed the compounding effect of several environmental burdens in this community.
Thanks for that. One thing I've been really impressed by is the number of different groups that have come together that are either formally part of your coalition or that have offered support and expertise to your coalition. So just tell us a little bit more about where you've had success in building relationships in your community around this issue. Maybe have there been some challenges? What can we learn from the way that the coalition has formed in Beloit?
So the coalition grew from our community science project that was started to look at particulate matter pollution. One thing to highlight is the DNR only monitors 1/3 of the counties in the state of Wisconsin, and we are a shining example of you don't know what you're not monitoring. So just because you can't say you don't have a problem unless you're monitoring. And then once we started to, that's when we really confirmed that there are issues. And so we, as part of the air monitoring project, we partnered with 2 local high schools, which we still have air monitors on those schools. They're not formally part of the coalition, but we do have a member from the local school board who's on as an individual. Different service organizations are part of our efforts. So Family Services, who has been serving our community over 90 years. We have outdoor education centers, Healthy Climate Wisconsin, the League of Women Voters, so different advocacy organizations, and then Wisconsin Equal Latinos. And yeah, so it's a pretty awesome, diverse group of organizations, and the NAACP Beloit branch is also has their climate justice chair also sits on the coalition.
Yeah, that's awesome. Like I said, I was just really impressed by that. The fact that you've brought together such a diverse range of leaders around this issue. Often in environmental organizing, we're just working with a small subset of groups in the community, but you've really done a lot of tremendous outreach. So you mentioned particulate matter. Could you tell us a little bit more about what's going on with the permitting of the proposed expansion at the Riverside Energy Center and where we go from here?
So unfortunately, as what happens with some of these projects, it was a bit flew under the radar initially with our coalition, even though we were looking for at addressing air pollution. And we're very grateful for MEA with representing us. We were able to call out and identify some different failures in recognizing public comment along the way, failure to adequately notify the public as they were supposed to. And so we were able to get a supplemental environmental assessment and have them take another look at what's going on. We were also able to get labs from UW-Eau Claire to submit, to look at air quality and do a comparative analysis for us, and then also individuals from Boston University do a health impact analysis. So I just want to, we were able to really get a lot of attention to the health harms of this methane gas plant. One, that's existing, and then 2, what will happen as this other one is built out. Unfortunately, the PSC has already approved this gas plant expansion, but we just had the DNR virtual public hearing, and we had an amazing turnout with some people who'd never testified before. They didn't plan to testify, but when they showed up, they were inspired by those who were there and what they were saying, and the public hearing lasted for an hour and a half. So right now we're waiting for that air permit to see what the final decision is.
I wanted to add too, so the coalition was formed before the Riverside energy plan was proposed. So we were just basically trying to work and figure out, about the really bad, poor air quality in the area. When then, we learn about this expansion of this energy plant that's going to increase the pollution, added more pollution to the already bad quality air in the area. So that's why we have been working, really hard to advocate for the community on this matter. Yeah, unfortunately, the PSC approved the plant, the permit, and then we're waiting for the DNR permit.
Thanks, Christina. Yeah, and that's an important point that the fact that you were organized and built coalition around this issue prior to some of these permittings allowed you to be able to respond more readily and to have, as you said, like that amazing turnout at the air permitting hearing just last week. So just real quick before we move on, what are some of your intermediate goals for the remainder of the year, let's say? What are you looking to accomplish? What do you hope can happen?
Well, we're going to continue to work towards our vision, which is creating a reality where we all have clean air to breathe. And so this is opposing new pollution sources for us, but air doesn't just stay right here, right? Like our pollution impacts Milwaukee County and vice versa. So really looking at how we can continue to educate and elevate the issues and advocate for others to help address some of these environmental injustices that are ongoing. So what's coming up next is there will be the Air Monitoring Network Plan public hearing with the Wisconsin DNR is coming up early June. So if folks are interested in advocating, I highly recommend looking at opportunities to speak towards cleaning up the air in your community or speaking up for other communities. And then we're going to continue to reach out to the PSC, the DNR, and even the governor. It's the year of the child, and the Beloit community has some of the highest asthma rates in our elementary schools, and my daughter's elementary school has the highest rates. And when I was in the classroom dressed as Miss Frizzle for Earth Day last week, one of the little kids, we were talking about pollution, and she said, rose her hand, and she said, I have asthma, and air pollution makes it worse. And I said, yes, honey, we're working to clean up the air. And she's like, my dad has it too, and he could die. And then 3 other kiddos rose their hand and said, I have asthma, I have asthma, I have asthma. So it's about like showing up for our kids, continuing the work. And it's one of the struggles is these utilities are very intentional in where they donate and who that they're influencing. So that's been one of the struggles, but our why is solid and our vision is focused. So we're going to continue the work.
Yes, correct. I definitely agree. Brittany. We are going to continue our work, engaging the community, educating them, and having them learn ways to protect their health, reduce the exposure.
Thank you both. The advocacy and work that you're doing in the community is just inspiring to all of us. And thanks for being here. And we'll have some question and answer at the end. So look forward to hearing more from you in just a little bit. So I want to next turn to another example and an opportunity that we have to make progress here. And this is related to work that MEA and others are doing to shut down the Line 5 Enbridge oil pipeline in northern Wisconsin. So I want to give you just a little bit of background about this. The current Line 5 route cuts across the heart of the Bad River Band of Lake Superior, Chippewa. And it does so because in 1953, the Bureau of Indian Affairs acting nominally as trustee for the band, granted Enbridge easements to construct and operate the pipeline on the reservation. Now, this scenario, this instance here is a classic case, a textbook case of an environmental injustice, burdening the band, an indigenous tribe, with a massive leaking piece of fossil fuel infrastructure. Fits that definition exactly. That environmental injustice started in 1953, but it continues to this day as Enbridge continues to operate the pipeline on the reservation despite expired easements. Because those easements are expired, in 2019, the band filed a lawsuit in federal court to force the removal of the pipeline. However, rather than shut down this aging pipeline, Enbridge applied for permits to construct a 41-mile reroute of the pipeline just outside the perimeter of the reservation. That reroute would continue to allow for the operation of the entire line across its over 600-mile stretch, and it would continue to operate the pipeline in the Bad River watershed. In November of last year, the Department of Natural Resources granted approvals and permits for the construction of this reroute project to move forward. After that, the Bad River Band of Lake Superior Chippewa challenged those permit decisions in a legal action, and they're joined in that challenge by Clean Wisconsin and Midwest environmental advocates. At MEA, we are engaging in that challenge on behalf of 3 clients that include 350 Wisconsin, the Sierra Club, and the League of Women Voters Wisconsin chapter. MEA, our clients and our partners are challenging these permits for the reroute because the project would cause significant impacts to wetlands and waterways along the construction corridor during the continuous operation of the pipeline. And as I said, this reroute would enable the continued operation of this over 70-year-old leaking pipeline. And so just to connect this for a moment here to our theme, as I said, the original construction and the continued operation of Line 5 is a clear case of an environmental injustice burdening an indigenous community with a piece of fossil fuel infrastructure in a way that is unjust and illegal, forcing that community to deal with the environmental harms and risks associated with that infrastructure. But Line 5 also represents a significant threat to the Bad River Band's treaty rights and the treaty rights of other Ojibwe tribes. Those treaty rights include the rights to hunt, fish, and gather on land and water that was ceded to the United States through treaties. And I just want to note that these treaty rights in many ways transcend the concept of environmental justice. Environmental justice is a framework that we've been talking about that pushes governments to promote environmental fairness, but treaty rights are fundamental rights that are owed to the Bad River Band and other Ojibwe tribes as governments themselves and are based on their inherent sovereignty. So I'm really glad to be joined by Paul Demain and by Rob Lee so we can say a little bit more about the work that's being done and about this issue. First of all, Paul and Rob, I tried to give a thumbnail sketch there of the Line 5 issue and where we're at right now. Is there anything that you would add to that summary for the audience?
Well, let me just do a broad comment because I was listening to Christine and Brittany a little bit about Beloit and so forth. And it just reminds me that half of the indigenous population from the reservations live in urban areas, and those urban areas tend to be Milwaukee, Beloit, the industrial zones, Detroit, Michigan, the places where cars were being made, where asbestos products were being produced. And so this is, to me, it seems like a triple or a quadruple whammy at sometimes in terms of what's going on with the administration and the fact that we've had to face, this April executive order by the Trump administration that says within the next year, they're going to sunset all kinds of executive orders and other laws and so forth having to do that impact tribes in the way they deal with the retained rights and treaty resources that they kept based on treaties that were signed with the United States. So I say that, there was these as long as the wind flows and the rivers flow, or kind of 60 days, whatever comes first kind of treaties, because we're fighting on so many levels. But to go back to the treaties, the Ojibwe Nation has 44 different treaties signed with the United States government. Remember that 60% of the Ojibwe Nation resided in Canada, that it was a smaller portion in the United States. And so there's considerations for property rights, retained exercise of hunting, fishing, property, real property like land and so forth. But the main treaties that impacted Wisconsin, Michigan, and Minnesota were 1825. That drew the line. And then it was kind of like a Pac-Man situation where, we wanted a little chunk of Minnesota, we'll leave you reside in the rest of it forever until we need the UP. And then we're going to take a little bit of chunk of that. And then we need the mining district or the timber district to rebuild Chicago. So we'll Pac-Man a little bite off of the Ojibwe Nation there. And so over the course of time, 44 treaties were signed with the U.S. government, but those treaties have an extension that reflect on each other and protect those rights, because they all dwelt on the fact that Ojibwe chiefs decided that in order to survive, they needed to retain the right. First of all, they needed a reserved homeland, the reservations, and they needed to be able to earn income and feed their families. And so the Ojibwe are one of several tribes in the United States that have this interest, a co-interest in management of public lands. So when we look at all the things that are impacting us, whether it's the Bald and Golden Eagle Protection Act, the Migratory Bird Act, the Marine Mammal Protection Act, the Endangered Species Act, and reflect on what happened to our food sources and our plant sources and our medicinal plants over the years, we've been through these, what seems to be devastating administrative and legislative cycles for many years. We reflect on how that impacts the Line 5 reroute. My understanding is the tribes are beginning to withdraw from what the U.S. government used to call meaningful consultation. The tribes are simply pulling out of those consultations and saying they're not meaningful when all the decisions are being made without consultation. And therefore, I can see that the tribes are setting up a situation where they're going to have to end up in the court of law, filing lawsuits to protect their rights. When we look at the entire process, Bismarck, where the Dakota Access Line went through, people in Bismarck complained about the potential spill north of Bismarck of that line. It was sent down below. Environmental justice issues, like you said, it's not very often that a affluent community gets the kind of projects that Indian reservations do with refineries and incinerator projects, and the Love Canal up in Mohawk, Akwesasne territory, and on and on and on, because these were all seen as potential great big money-making, job-making, industrialized things that would somehow, kick the savage out of the Indian and have him settle down. And so it's very easy for a pipeline company, for example, to decide that they want to get a reroute over 50 or 60 miles of national park land, when it's a lot harder to get the same kind of a permit from 450 farmers that might reside across that line. And so we're still fighting to, first of all, get recognized that these inherent rights are there, that tribal governments have a right to protect those rights. They have a right to access. They have a right to camp on public lands. They have a right to bring guests there. They have a right to harvest medicines, food. They have a right to fish. They have a right to hunt. And that any degradation of those, any further degradation of those resources, because there's been a tremendous, I mean, there were no elk in northern Wisconsin. There was other species that have disappeared as well, are detrimental to the ability of an indigenous community individual to take care of his household, take care of his family, take care of his community, and protect it from harmful effects. So when we go over to Minnesota and look at what Michaels did over in Minnesota with aquifer breaches, the use of chemicals, with failed plans for horizontal drilling and everything. We're simply.
So you're talking about Line 3? The Line 3 project.
Line 3 in that particular case, but it's a good example of what we're going to face in Wisconsin,
Yeah,
because the
absolutely.
Department of Natural Resources takes what Enbridge says on his face and knows it comes from its consultant. So we're not going to have a breach of this aquifer. We're not going to do that. We're going to abide by this. The fact is that I think that Wisconsin should outlaw any further action by some of these corporations that were involved in the destruction of the aquifers in Minnesota, until it's been 2 or 3 years now since that line went in, and some of those aquifers are still breaching and leaking. So these companies shouldn't be allowed to come in and do more damage to the environment when we have prime examples of why they shouldn't be doing any construction work in Wisconsin. So I'll hand it over to Rob for a few comments on that, but I think that gives the general position, and it's always interesting that Enbridge, a foreign corporation, invokes treaties that were signed in 1977, somehow thinks they just simply override treaties that have been long-standing, because in our community, when certain administrations come along, they act like they can simply ignore the indigenous community and do what they want. And that's in part what's happening. So.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks for giving us that historical context and
Try
talking
to wake
about.
everyone up.
Covered a lot of ground. I'm awake. My mind's racing after that, Paul. I had a couple of thoughts that I just wanted to add real quick. Right, you heard Paul talk about treaty rights, and particularly not only reserving the reservation itself, but the right to hunt and fish and gather off of the reservation, off reservation treaty rights. And that's why the Line 5 reroute is a little bit of a false solution. Yes, you're moving it off the reservation, but it's still very much within the ceded territory. And not only will the construction itself impact the environment and the ability to exercise those treaty rights, the operation of Line 5 in that area and the risks that go along with that indefinitely, right, of a rupture, potentially even more catastrophic. And it's not just this new 41-mile reroute. It's facilitating the continued operation of the rest of the 640 some odd miles of the pipeline that impact other tribes as well downstream who are fighting it over, like in Michigan and things like that. So facilitating the rest of the pipeline that's been over there, been in the ground for more than 70 years, was supposed to be there 40 to 50. And so it's not just the reroute that threatens these treaty rights. It's the continued operation of the rest of Line 5 as well. So I had a bunch more thoughts at that, but I thought that was an important
Let me
one.
ask you, Rob, could you just give us a little bit of a summary of where things stand with the Wisconsin permitting right now, what we expect to happen over the summer? And then I'll ask you to touch a little bit on partnerships and how that's played out in this context. What are the partnerships that have formed? And I'll ask Paul to talk about the partnerships that he's seen related to Line 5 opposition, and we'll probably transition on to Shy after that. But go ahead, Rob. Just give us an update of where things stand and where we're headed.
Well, I think the big thing to point out is the federal trespass lawsuit that the band filed. A federal judge in that case actually ruled that Enbridge was indeed in trespass and said they must shut down Line 5, where it operates on those parcels in trespass, by June of 2026. So if they don't accomplish the reroute by June of next year, that is 13 months away, if that federal court order holds, they will have to shut the pipeline down here in Wisconsin. And what's holding up the reroute? It's that legal challenge you mentioned, that the Bad River Band and MEA on behalf of Sierra Club and League of Women Voters and 350 Wisconsin and Clean Wisconsin all brought, right, that actually stayed DNR's decision to issue the permits that Enbridge needed to start construction of the reroute. And we're currently in the midst of litigation right now. I had to rest myself from a bit of work just to join you here at this webinar.
Thank you.
As far as partnership goes, I mean, I've been doing this opposition to Line 5 for what, 5, 6, 7 years now. It's how I met Paul. talk about partners right there. Paul's a force to be reckoned with in and of himself. I mentioned Sierra Club, a huge, older national non-governmental organization, right, that's been at the forefront of environmental protection since that it was a thing, right? Partnering and getting involved here to back up the Bad River Band and its opposition here. But all the actors at the state level and the state level chapter of Sierra Club, and the same with League of Women Voters and 350 Wisconsin too, but everybody else in between, all the people on the ground that we meet and talk to, and all the yard signs I see that say shut down line 5, know that we're making a difference, that our partnerships are getting the message out there and making a difference. And who knows, maybe 13 months from now, or we're met with some success.
Thanks, Rob. Paul, you talked about the fact that our state needs to step up, that Wisconsin needs to step up. What kind of partnerships do you think we need to be forming in Wisconsin to make that happen?
Well, I think one of the best opportunities to form partnerships has been going on, because as we go to the streets and some of the Defend Democracy events, there's a lot of people there that have been afraid to come out because of one reason or another. And we're rubbing elbows with people that have concerns about these environmental issues as well. Rob brought up the fact that even if this little reroute takes place on the 40 miles section around Bad River, it still leaves a operating pipeline that's over 70 years old, both in northern Wisconsin, but in the UP and across the Mackinac Straits, where you have a whole different coalition of environmental groups and tribes suing on different grounds there, some similar grounds, some different grounds, but the potential impact of a leak in the Mackinac Straits would be devastating to the tribal fishery and in fact, to the business community. And so I find that in northern Wisconsin, Communities United by Water, which is really an ad hoc group of people that get together to have interests in the water. It's the business community, it's the political community. We've got a multi-million-dollar economy going to and from Madeline Island, which would be shut down with an oil leak. You have artesian wells that are in the area that are prominently known by people throughout the world that come in the area. So looking at the issue of protecting the water is something that's brought a lot of the business, the political, and the social allies out on our behalf. And then, of course, building those cases with attorneys who are like-minded and want to get into the court and be feisty a little bit is something that we're leaning on, because that tends to be the place where these battles end up costing corporations so much money that in some cases they decided to default or give up or do something different. It'll be interesting to see what happens under this administration. But we continue to build those coalitions wherever we can.
Thank you, Paul. I like that. I know some feisty attorneys. Well, I want to move us along here, and Shai, you've been patient. I'm really excited to talk to you. As Peg said, Shaquita McElroy is the executive director of the Coalition on Lead Emergency. MEA has been working with COAL, or the Coalition on Lead Emergency, for a number of years now to advocate for policies and new sources of funding to address the disproportionately high rates of lead poisoning in historically redlined neighborhoods in Milwaukee in 53206 and 53205. COAL's mission has been to prevent and to respond to childhood lead poisoning in Milwaukee. As Peg mentioned, the coalition is guided by the advocacy and the perspective of parents of impacted kids. Shai, I'll ask you to tell us a little bit more about the coalition, but I'll say as an introduction that the coalition has been enormously successful, in my opinion, in securing commitments from local leaders to have more ambitious goals for the replacement of lead service laterals, to do more through the health department, to abate the homes of lead poisoned kids when there are lead hazards that are driving the issue. And it has done a great job keeping that grassroots pressure up to ensure that local leaders honor those commitments and continue that progress, even if federal requirements become weakened, as we've talked about. So, Shai, I'll hand it over to you. Tell us a little bit about coal, how you became involved, and why this issue is important to you.
Yeah, hello everyone. Thanks for having me. So I became involved with coal about 6 years ago. It originally started at a small back table in the back of our church at Heather Lutheran Church on 18th and Locust. And it was just a table that had just really simple information about lead exposure because a lot of the children in the congregation were being exposed to lead poisoning. And so from there, I got asked to come in and do some education with the children at a couple of events. And I already had a past of organizing and being an organizer, grassroots organizer. So I was asked to come on as the only employee that was going to be outreaching to parents and starting to organize them around educating them on lead poison, but then also just getting them bought into the fact that we need to uplift our voices and do something about it. So that came about with the proposal to the Joint Finance Committee here in Milwaukee around a Birthing Moms pilot program project where we secured $240,000 to get moms and expecting moms and moms of infant children before they left the hospital. Before they left the hospital, sorry, lead safe kits so that they could combat the lead exposure in their infants on their way home. So that program was really successful. We exceeded the expectations of that and began to shed light. The light came on us from entities like the health department, Milwaukee Water Works, and state officials. And so we took that opportunity to start holding them accountable for what they were doing. And through that accountability, we went in with the health department first because that's where everything kind of started at with the actionable level. And the original actionable level in Wisconsin was 20 micrograms per deciliter. And if you're any kind of aware of what that means for a child who's lead poisoned, 20 micrograms per deciliter is above and beyond. Is basically saying, okay, if your child is sick, they're not sick enough if they're not over that 20 micrograms per deciliter. I have a child who was lead poisoned at a very young age from the time I brought him home from the hospital all the way up until the age of 5. And he was only poisoned at 9.9. And he experienced cognitive and educational delays, vision problems, behavior issues, and the list goes on. And that was at 9.9 micrograms per deciliter. So imagine that with it being the actionable level being 20, my child doesn't qualify. Even with those disadvantages, my child still doesn't qualify for that help. So it was something that needed to be done about it. So that's what expand our work and expand what we needed to do. We had a focus, we had a goal, we had a task at hand that we wanted to accomplish right away, and that was lowering the actionable level. The unfortunate event that happened was COVID happened, and the fortunate thing that came out of that was ARPA dollars were given to states. And so this was our opportunity to draw up another proposal and get the health department what they needed to do the job that they promised that they were going to do for the community. And that was to start lead abatement programming, up lead testing, because the heaviest impacted zip codes were 5 through 205 and 5 through 206. But they were the zip codes with the lowest testing rates. So to get more testing done in those zip codes, lead abatement programming, and just outreach. So who was going to do these programmings? And that's where we came up with the proposal that included entities that would work on those different areas of expertise, and including Milwaukee Water Works doing lead service line replacement, because we can take the lead out of the house, but if they're still drinking the lead in the water, then there's still a problem inside of the home. So we tackled all of those fronts. It has been very successful in getting those programs up and going and building a relationship with the health department. And I say building a relationship because in a lot of instances, folks think that we had to mend the relationship with the health department when there was never a relationship between the community and entities like the health department, Milwaukee Water Works, We Energies, and things of that nature. So just to draw a comparison and give you an idea of how damaged this community is and how damaged their trust is in these entities, we had to start from nothing and really build the transparency and build the bridge with these entities so that when they're knocking on doors and coming to offer services, families are actually opening the doors for them. Families are engaging in conversations with them. Families are willing to do the steps that it takes to get the lead out of their homes. And that took for us to finally have a seat at the table with these entities and be included in the decision making that happened going forward. So some of the things that we did was we got the actionable level lowered to 10 micrograms per deciliter. So that was a huge victory for parents. It encouraged parents, it uplifted their spirits. But outside of that, I know everyone is probably thinking like, well, what about the folks who are 9.9 and below? We had a plan for them as well. 9.9 and below, they are referred to us over at Cole, and we take care of the case ourselves. So we actually secured funding through the ARPA grant funding to take care of those cases ourselves. So we equip the families with lead testing and the children to lower the level inside the home. Our entire team has underwent lead abatement worker training and lead abatement supervisor training. So we're qualified to go inside the home and encapsulate a wall so that the children are not picking at the paint and eating the paint. We were supplied with the funds to make sure that all these families receive lead safe kits. We have been trained and now we're giving the trainings to parents to educate them on lead, educate them on canvasser training, organizing training, so that the biggest thing that we came into organizing and creating this organization with was we're parents organizing parents. We're effective parents organizing effective parents. And that's what set us aside from other entities trying to do the lead work is we're not we're not having folks who don't know the stories of these parents show up to their door and try to tell them how they're affected. We're having affected folks and people who have lived this firsthand show up to the doors and say, hey, I know what you're going through. I've been there and this is how we fix it. And so that's what really, really helped to inspire a lot of parents to join us, a lot of parents to come out, a lot of parents to be involved, a lot of parents to really want to get the education themselves to then pass it on. Word of mouth is, I found out through organizing this, is very, very strong and powerful. So in doing so, that brought us to where we are today, and we're starting to get where we need to be with state legislation being passed, and folks are really listening, and the folks that we need to listen are listening. We just need to keep going and keep making it bigger and keep making it stronger and keep pressing forward, because at the end of the day, we're saving children's lives.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just an amazing story of community building, of trust building, of power building. And at MEA, we're lucky just to get to be close to it and to witness the work that you're doing, Shai. I have one question for you, and then we've had one question from the audience that I'll throw to you, Shai, and then the rest of the panel to kind of close us out here. So, Shai, tell us a little bit more about the coalition. Who's involved in the coalition, and what does that look like? How are the voices and perspectives of parents centered within the coalition? And then my closing question for all of us is, how do we stay inspired and motivated as we see these attacks on the federal level um, towards the idea of environmental justice? How do we stay motivated and build hope and make progress in our communities? So, Shai, go ahead.
Yeah, so our a breakdown of how we're kind of made up is different committees. So we have our advocacy committee, which Tony is the chair of, and the work that he does with helping us with that is tremendous. If not for the volunteering and the know-how to lead us into advocating and help transparently conveying to our parents how to advocate for themselves, like that is a big portion of how we get to the next step. Is we can't have Tony go up there and say, hey, this is Shai and this is her story. We need Shai to go up there herself, and in order to do so, we need people like Tony and and MEA to be our partners and help us with that transition to get parents to the point of advocating for themselves. And that has been a tremendous help, and it has worked out beautifully. We have so many parents that are willing to speak and willing to have a voice. Outside of that, we have a communications team. So our communications committee, our workforce development committee, and then our organizing committee, which I am the chair of. Those committees allow us to have parents that are like, okay, well, I'm not good at this, but I can do this. I'm not good at speaking, but I'll take pictures at the event. I'm not good at getting up, talking in front of folks, but I'll go and make some phone banking phone calls. You know, they could be part of those committees and know that the work that's being done, they have a seat at the table no matter who is running that committee. They can run the committee themselves. So that's another special portion of what we do. And as far as what inspires us to keep going and inspires our parents to keep driving is, despite everything that's going on in the EPA, which it has affected us tremendously, despite what's going on there, I think that philanthropists and folks that are willing, organizations and individuals that are willing to say, you know what, this is not a blue issue or a red issue. This is everyone's issue. You don't have to be a Republican or a Democrat to care about a child that's not yours. You don't have to, live in poverty to care about those who live in poverty. You don't have to have children who go to MPS to care about children that are suffering from lead poison at MPS. I think that's what keep parents going, because there's folks out there like that who are willing to step up and say, you know what, I have funding to contribute to what you guys are doing. I have funding to make sure that 100 parents get lead safe kits. I have funding to make sure that we keep you guys employed so that you can go and educate these parents. Even something as small as, I have funding so you guys can print flyers for your cooking class. I want to come and volunteer and put lead safe kits together and help out at your cooking class, so that we got well-fed children and they have less lead. That all of those things is what keep parents coming and keep parents going. And I actually just got a call today, and I'll make this very fast. I actually just got a call today. We had a cooking class today that I canceled because two of our staff members had to go out of town for an emergency, so we were short staffed. And at the last minute, one of the parents called me. She's like one of our leaders, and she called me and she's like, there's no cooking class today. And I'm like, no, we had to cancel it because we were really, really short staffed. I couldn't find volunteers at the last minute. And she was like, Shy, don't ever do that again. She was like, all you had to do is just call me. I could have called 20 other parents. They could have called 5 other parents, and we could have started a train and got the groceries in, packed the groceries. Like, you didn't need to find other volunteers outside of us. We can volunteer. I know you guys, she was like, I know you guys do this all for us, but sometimes you need to stop and think we can help too. And we forget that, because we're so dedicated to making sure that they understand that we're here to help and we're here to give resources. We're not here to charge you for anything. We're not here to ask you for anything or take anything away from you. You've had enough of that in your life. But every now and so often they remind us, like, you have too. You're an effective parent as well. So we're in this together. So I think all of those things are a combination of what keep us going.
That's amazing. Yeah, there's always that next person who's willing to step up and lead. That's great. So I throw that question open to everyone. What is keeping you inspired despite everything that we're seeing in Washington, D.C. and the impacts that we're feeling? What is keeping you inspired and
I'll
motivated?
jump in.
Yeah,
I
Paul.
came out from outside today after putting my garden in. Yesterday, I spent a great deal of time in ceremony with people praying about mothers, children, families, food, and peace of mind. Feed a next door neighbor. Make sure your family's fed. Make sure that you have the back of your neighborhood. Plant that garden. Look for your local food sources. Humor the enemy. Write poetry, make music and dance like hell. We can't let them define us. We can't let them change us. We need to be ourselves, and I think being ourselves is the best way. Turn that TV off and go out in the woods for a walk. If you like to fish, keep doing the things you need to do.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Paul. Now more than ever, we need to continue focus on the work, not the noise. and it keeps me motivated to hear and see when our community, when we do our workshops and hear how they learn and they're surprised and they're learning something new and they're learning how to take care of their health and their families. That's what keeps us going.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. I'm motivated and inspired by all of the work that is being done by these panelists and your communities and MEA, and just highlighting that the work that's being done in Milwaukee is going to advance the lead remediation in Beloit and that exists throughout the state. And an attack on sovereign rights or attack on everyone's rights. And so everyone needs, and working to clean the air here is working to clean the air and push the DNR and the regulators to really protect the people and live by their mission. Right now, there's a great opportunity to continue to push our regulators to do what they're supposed to do, right? Protect the people and live by their mission, protect the environment, and also, yeah, continue to show up for the causes that are important to you, and as you're able to show up for everyone else, because your voice makes a difference. A lot of lawmakers at the state level, the federal level, rough. Like, we have to acknowledge that. But at the state level, there are a lot of people that are starting to open their eyes, and we have to keep speaking to our stories and what's important to us. And I love what Paul said as far as getting outside and doing what brings you joy too.
Thank you. Thank you, Brittany. Well, I think we should leave it there. We're over the hour, but this has been truly amazing. I want to close by lifting up what Brittany just said. We need to show up for one another. Thanks to everyone who joined us today to show up for us, for all of us on this webinar to help build and form the connections and the movement that we have here in Wisconsin. We're proud to be in community with this group and with all of you. So thank you all for joining us, and we wish you a pleasant evening.